Welcome, sentient beings from all known universes and beyond. It's time to activate your cranial downlinks and prepare to receive a raft of discussion on a cosmic ocean of science fiction and fantasy topics, interviews with local area genre devotees, and insightful prognostication by our soothsayers of science fiction, our forecasters of fantasy, and any other beings that happen to get caught in our gravity well. This is the Galactic Driftwood Podcast.
And hello and welcome back to another excellent episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. Bill and Linda are still out, probably not committing human sacrifices in service of their dark god during the eclipse.
Never really know.
Look, we don't know for sure, and that's going to be my story to the police.
There you go.
Anyway, while Bill and Linda are gone, we thought we would have a talk about movies or TV shows based on a true story.
Big quotes on based.
Yeah. Based on a true story. That phrase carries a lot of weight for some of these.
Maybe inspired. Maybe.
Yep.
Some of these are inspired by events that someone thought happened once.
Yeah, I think you're getting closer to it.
For example, the last year's smash hit "The Sound of Freedom" is pretty much just based on how some people imagined how something might go if they were competent.
Well, I think there's three levels here. There is based on a true story, which in theory holds more of what really actually happened. Then you have inspired by true events, because I didn't really notice the distinction until I was looking more into this genre. Period. Inspired by, which means someone could have just heard a half-assed thing or a little piece, and like you said, Seth, and then spun it into a whole movie. And then you have the genre of they market it as if it really happened, but it didn't happen whatsoever. It's just a very clever ploy, like Blair Witch. I'd say Blair Witch and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre were one, like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre for sure. People thought it had actually happened the way it was filmed and some of the marketing around it. And it was all out of Wes Craven's head. And then the Blair Witch Project did a lot of really cool early filming, and it was the first one to utilize a website to make it seem like it had actually happened, and but it didn't. So we got three levels here.
The Blair Witch was a while back. That was the one that made people sick, right?
That was shaky cam footage.
That was shaky cam footage, right?
That was
trying to make it as real as possible.
Yeah, that was one of the first found footage ones.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the Chainsaw Massacre was actually, once again, loosely based around a serial killer, Ed Gein.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole chainsaw thing, the director talked about what the story behind that is. It's funny. He doesn't like being in a lot of large crowds, and he was out shopping, and he was kind of getting tired of everyone being around him. He happened to be in the hardware section, and he looked at this chainsaw, and he's like, if I started this right now, people would run for their lives. So from there, one thought led to the other, and we got Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Interesting. But, I mean, there's, of course, Titanic. Like, the story itself is completely made up, but the setting and the situation, like James Cameron did a lot of research getting all that stuff right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I mean, kind of what got me thinking about this topic again is, so on Netflix, they've got 2014's Deliver Us from Evil, which is about a Bronx NYPD officer who works one of the roughest areas of the city. And he gets pulled into cases where there could be paranormal, diabolical variables inside. Possessions, exorcisms, things like that start occurring. This is supposedly how he got started down that route, because he was a cop for 17, 18 years. So he got put on a lot of the weird cases and ultimately left the force to do this work full time and wrote a book about it. And then the director who did The Exorcism of Emily Rose, for those of us who've seen that, that movie was based on a true story, which tried to take more facts from the actual exorcism case of Annalise Michael. When this is inspired by Deliver Us from Evil, is inspired by his his actual cases of exorcism and the paranormal. And the movie in itself was entertaining. It was creepy, but did they need to say that it was inspired by true events? I don't know. I mean, is it just a marketing ploy that movies can't not use if it's there for them to take advantage of?
I think they do take advantage of it, and they take too much liberty with it, because at some point, on some of these films, I'm not saying Deliver Us from Evil specifically, but in some of them, what you have is this guy existed. Everything else that happens in the film, maybe not so much, but this guy existed. He was a cop. He worked some weird cases, and then that's it. and then you build this film around it, full of a lot of paranormal stuff and exorcisms, and a little bit of that disconnect. I mean, obviously, you want to make a film, you want to make money on it. It didn't make money in this film, but that's
loosely based on facts. So.
Yeah, loosely based on supposed facts of things that could have happened in some alternate reality.
I will say something about Emily Rose, because I wasn't a big fan of the movie, but I did wake up at 3:33 every morning for the next year. So beware. It got to me.
Well, what I thought Emily Rose did a very, very good job was it was showing how it could have been perceived as an actual psychiatric condition that she was suffering. Mm-hmm. Or it could have been paranormal. They did a really good job showing both sides, I thought, of the coin and the argument for either case, at least from what I remember. It's been several years since I saw it, but I remember walking out of the theater and feeling like they did a good job with that. I could be wrong if I were to watch it again. I don't know. And when I read into the background of this movie, this guy ended up becoming working with Ed and Lorraine Warren, who worked the Conjuring case, the Amityville horror case, which there's a lot of questions, some of the validity of those cases. But it's interesting. It's interesting that they can't, they ended up in some of the same circles. And that almost to me is more, what cases did they actually work together? What cases actually came out? That could have been a more interesting film in itself. And maybe you could have had facts. Apparently there is VHS footage of him working a possession in the 90s. This particular character from Deliver Us from Evil, the actual cop, Sarchi, and Olivia Munn and Eric Bana, who plays him in the movie, tried to watch the footage together to get a better understanding of this guy's background, and they had to turn it off because it was too terrifying for them. Like this guy, he's looking at the camera and his forehead actually just splits on its own and starts bleeding. They used it in the movie, but apparently it actually happened during an exorcism. And it's creepy.
That is a bit creepy. Can we find that footage? We don't have to right now.
It's actually online. Apparently, that link I sent, I think it might be, I don't know if they posted that actual footage, but there is links to some of their videos from the possessions, the real possessions.
Yeah.
So possessions, yeah.
Real possessions.
Yes.
Let's put that in heavy quotes.
If you believe you're possessed, does it become a form of dissociative identity disorder? I don't know.
If you believe you're possessed, go to see a professional before you go and get an exorcism, please.
I mean, if placebos are found to be just as effective and it's cheaper to go get an exorcism in today's healthcare system, and and you need the placebo that you've had in exorcism to feel better.
I mean, if we're talking purely about cost, I can knock it out for $20, but it's going to be just as effective as this Catholic priest. I'll get the props. I'll research some Latin to say, and we'll get that demon right out of you.
Or you could do something in between and go see a chiropractor.
It was gas. It was just gas the whole time.
I mean, there's a reason why we call it getting the demons out.
But and that's where you get, like, there were elements of this that are fake, but it makes for a great story. But do you ruin it by attaching the inspired by true events? Another good example Chris brought up from last year was The Pope's Exorcist with Russell Crowe. It was entertaining.
It a little bit better.
It was entertaining.
The Pope's Sexorcist. Which is a completely different movie that's also based on true events.
I think you downloaded the wrong film.
Yeah, I think it's the next $1 million idea right there.
I mean, yeah, that movie went completely different than what I was expecting based on screenshots you sent me, Jenna.
Doop-de-doo.
You will not guess what he's got underneath that hat.
Yeah, the Pope's Exorcist definitely took a lot of liberties and actually had a lot of things in the film that apparently just never actually happened. And if I recall, it opens with Russell Crowe's character working to get a demon out of can't remember if it was a child or a man, but getting it trapped into a goat and then shooting the goat. And that whole thing never happened. But it was taken. There was they talk about there's some age differences because the person that Russell Crowe's portraying didn't actually become an exorcist until like his early 60s or something like that. So he was very, I won't say late to the game in that respect, but like this stuff didn't really happen until really later on in his life, and it's portrayed as happening a lot earlier in the film. And so the Pope that Russell Crowe, not the Pope, but the father that he portrays in the film does exist in real life. Has been doing kind of this stuff for a very long time as far as exorcisms go, but a lot of what was portrayed in the film were just nitpicks, little cherry-picked stories of his accounts that had occurred, and then obviously embellished to make the film what it is today. So I thought it was good. It was a good watch. It was entertaining, but to the point, things that are a bit detached from reality that are based on real stories. It's more like based on people that actually existed, and maybe in a supernatural world, what their life could have been like.
And maybe it's a legal issue because at the end of normal fictional movies that are purely fiction and explicitly fiction, there's that little quote at the end of the credits that says this was completely original. Any possible coincidence with people or other things or relationship or similarities is completely coincidental. That whole spiel at the end of the credits. As if to get themselves out of potential legal trouble. And this is the way of saying, yeah, we were absolutely inspired by these events. We're going to use it. We paid them. So we don't want people coming after us for money later for the idea.
Yeah. I mean, so how different would something like Amityville hit if they didn't put inspired by true events or based on true events?
I
don't think it would have hit the same.
That's the marketing part of it, right?
Well, I'm trying to think of a modern murder, but like an older film, like In Cold Blood, right, which is about two killers and Truman Capote and all that. That's not fun, but it's an interesting watch. And I think it's old. It's an old film, but it's presented realistically. You get over the death penalty and all that. And that is an entirely different movie than Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know. But if you're going to be entertained, then I suppose you want fiction. But if you want just something cerebral,
do you want to get mind fucked or not? Right?
Yeah, I mean, well, at least there's a different way of, you're not going to get, like In Cold Blood, you don't get suddenly scared. Nothing's jumping out at you from the screen. It's just.
So 1917, I think, is another good example of this. It's not like names were changed, and it's not an exact true story, but the person who wrote it did base almost everything off of stories he heard from his grandfather, who was an actual World War I runner. I think it was his grandfather, but he literally had to, because it's the World War I, and you have limited communications. You had to literally run these poor kids across battle lines to get information. So did it happen exactly as they portray in the film? No, but it's a very similar experience that would have had to go through. I mean, so he tried to stay true to the experiences, and I think he did a really good job, I think, capturing the spirit of what they had to go through. But would that make it any less valuable than if you would have tried to make it exactly perfect to a true life encounter from one of the stories? I don't think so, but maybe it would to some people. Overall, so I heard a great quote from another movie critic. He said, ideally, the based on true life movies are trying to give you an incredible experience that someone actually lived through. So you get inspired either through overcoming something, or you get empathy with a terrible experience. Think Black Hawk Down. Mm-hmm. So ideally, if anything, you should be hearing a story that seems incredible, but can inspire you because people actually lived through it. No matter what the outcome was, someone actually went through this. Holy crap. So it knocks you out of your maybe soft life if you're not in a war-torn area, or you've never encountered a haunting, or, whatever experience they're trying to show in film. And I think movies are great for that.
They do that. They have a history of doing them well in a lot of cases, particularly when it comes to our veterans or people who've gone to war. American Sniper is another one. Based off of Kyle. Fortunately,
but even that filter here was problematic in that movie.
Yep. Yeah.
But it was good, and it gave you insight. The movie was good. It was entertaining.
Well, that's a lot of biographies that have a made-up scene that's a combination of a lot of stories. Right. I mean, but for the sake of the movie, it presents the person with, and I remember one of them was like in the movie Nixon, there's this scene where he drunk calls people. And I don't know that they ever had, I think it was a made up quote. It was a made up conversation, but it presented Nixon. And I think there's rumors that he did drunk call people. But if I remember right, nobody was going to give up what the conversations actually were, so they made it up. But
inspired or based on a true story, there is a lot of room for artistic license. But I can see how something about Nixon, it might be important to capture that aspect of his personality, even
trying to capture the essence of him. Yeah, and capturing the essence, it might be in a lie. But I'm okay with that as long as you can tell. I mean, if you wanted to look into it, if you're that interested, then
I'm sure there's someone who knows out there.
Yeah, it actually opened.
Maybe they're just. But then, why wouldn't you tell that story? Why wouldn't you tell the story of the time that the president drunk dialed you?
Well, There's a good reason to tell that story.
Why didn't people talk about more explicitly in the media what a hound dog that Kennedy was? It was just a different time, and they were like, well, he's doing a good job, so we're just not going to talk about these other things out of respect to the office.
I mean, with Kennedy, there's a certain amount of respecting the dead, but I don't think that we have that same sort of respect for Nixon.
Well, we do need that movie, though. I need Kennedy.
Well, yeah, like
but so there is a place. So Schindler's List. There's a based on a true story movie, and the daughter of the general, or the SS officer played by Ray Fiennes, who ultimately gets hung at the end of Schindler's List, but he was running one of the camps and was a terrible person. His daughter had no clue who her father was in the war and what role he played until she saw the movie. And
oh my,
it was a huge wake-up call. And I think that's where the place of these movies, when done right, is really important, because you aren't losing that experience. I know there was there's always problems with these movies. Hotel Rwanda, same thing. They did not get everything just right. It may not have been as ethically clean behind some of the decisions that were displayed in the movie, but how much would people know or even have an interest of understanding what happened during the genocide if it was not made into a movie? So even if it's not 100% perfect, I think if it gets people to stop and explore, like you just said, Charles, and look more into it, maybe if nothing else, that's what you need.
But then on the other hand, like, you can have some of these movies where their take on it becomes the history that most people know.
That's true.
If in some instances, like, a lot of our based on a true story war movies are pretty much propaganda. So like, that's just like not doing a real service towards educating people almost.
And then they would say, well, it's not about education, it's the emotion of the human experience. And maybe that's a lot of bullshit, but I think in some cases it's not either.
I've ended up in it, not even loosely based on the event, but I'm thinking like I think it was Lovecraft Country. I think I ended up doing a whole bunch of reading about the Tulsa stuff.
Yeah.
And even the Three Body Problems out right now, I ended up reading a few essays about the Maoist revolution, right? Not that I wasn't aware that existed with Mao, but I did a refresher, so to speak. And so, yeah, there's a lot. I like the movies based in, especially based in history that's kind of outside the normal what you're taught in school, whatever. But I love it.
And I think it can be done right. I mean, even if it's completely fictional. So here's so you have a movie like the miniseries Band of Brothers, which stayed really, really close to the history. And so much so you even have the old versions of the characters and you don't know which characters they are until the very last episode where they put the names underneath them. So you then find out who they were in the series. And then you've got Saving Private Ryan, which is completely fictional, but it's been said to have truly captured what the experience would have been very, very well. So you can have a movie, it seems like if you really put the effort into it, you can have that fictional movie without the based on a true story and have the same impact of educating people.
So I think there's a real difference. It all depends kind of on who is in charge of the project. A lot of what we've talked about as good examples were directed by Steven Spielberg. And he seems to have a real interest in history. especially around the World War II period. He probably has researched quite a bit and knows quite a bit and has talked to quite a few people to base these movies on. If you get a good director who's really into the material, I think you're going to see a much better movie. Like I mentioned, Titanic. Basically, James Cameron made the movie because he wanted to fund his own expeditions down to the Titanic because he's a huge nerd about that sort of stuff.
I respect that. I respect
and
that.
I think that sort of passion leads to a good movie and a better understanding of the topics at hand.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. I was trying to think like for war. This again old, but like Slaughterhouse-Five, right? Obviously, most of it's not based in reality, but a little bit of it is. It's autobiographical, some of it, and you get the anti-war vibe without even being realistic looking, older movies.
And that's where so we're talking about history, and it's easier to buy into and give a pass because, okay, you're just trying to capture the emotion. Maybe you didn't get all the facts right. I think where it becomes more challenging for people is in horror, because there are people who are very religious, and I'm not going to judge them, and they see a horror movie that's based on a true story, and they're going to be like, I'm sure it happened that way. And then you have people who are atheist or maybe agnostic, and they're like, yeah, that was entertaining horror, but there's no way it would happen like that.
Yeah,
that's me. I'm a horrible person to take to a horror movie, especially exorcisms and stuff like that. It's rough.
I really like those haunting and demon possession movies. Like, those are some of my favorite horror movies because they're the ones that get to me, mostly because of past like Christian bullcrap that's still hanging around. I'm like, no, I could be possessed. But like, those are the types of movies I like, but at the same time, I'm also just picking apart every little detail in my brain because I can't help it. But I mean, what was it? Yeah, the original The Exorcist was like terrifying, especially to like Catholics.
It was a cultural moment, the impact that movie had. Like, there were people passing out in theaters.
Yeah, like,
it was a boon to the Catholic faith because all of a sudden exorcisms started popping up.
And it's probably what catapulted Lauren and Elaine, or the Warrens, into their successes. Just like people seeing these movies and like thinking, oh, gotta call it Exorcist now. But yeah, the Exorcist was just one of those movies that shifted things. And like some of those classic horror movies pushed some real boundaries for people, which we may not really appreciate right now because we've grown up with it.
Probably. I think that's absolutely it. Like, there are movies now that everyone's like, oh, this was so scary. And then you watch it and you're like, meh. Although Exorcist does absolutely stay creepy.
I don't hear you're right though. I remember because I knew adults that ended up having to, like, The Exorcist just did them in, and they're had to take some psych meds or whatever afterwards. Like, which is something I don't understand because I've never seen a movie so scary to me that I might get the chills that night at home, but that's the worst of it.
Yeah, for me, the scariest ones are just further disconnect me from any sort of reality that could have even existed within any of the story in and of itself. So, and I get that sometimes they want. I prefer the chilling ones where there's less paranormal, and things that jump out at you or whatnot. I prefer the chilling ones where it's the subtle messages or the subtle looks or the comments and things like that are made between people in the stories versus, and leaves a little bit of mystery as opposed to like, now this, granted, Jenny, apparently this happened, a guy's head splits open and starts freaking out and maybe he's levitating off the floor or something. And I don't know, those tend to further disconnect me from those things in terms of believable or attributing it to any kind of real type of story. But it's entertaining at the end of the day, right? And we all kind of need some entertainment, whether it scares
distraction.
us. Distraction. So,
or just to feel something. And I think that's kind of what we're all hoping for when we go to the movies, no matter if it's based on a true story, inspired by a true story, or maybe made to make you think it was a true story. We're looking for an escape. And that's the mark of a good movie.
Here is probably if they did a Transformers movie based off of someone's life and true events or something like that happened, is probably the day I throw a chair and just I'm done.
Okay.
Godzilla -1.
Oh, yeah.
And I was upset over Kamikaze for the next 2 weeks. Something got to me. So,
I mean, like that's the sort of thing where you place a fictional story in a kind of a real world setting, and that's really interesting too.
Yeah, but there was just enough that I wasn't expecting it.
But no, Chris, I like your idea. Let's do the American Revolution, but with Transformers. Go, go, go!
Yes,
my body is ready.
George Washington riding into battle on Optimus Prime. Yes.
I'm gonna have to try and get AI to generate that image for us later. We'll generate the movie poster.
And then let that be the cover for this podcast.
Oh my god.
We also right now we are copywriting this idea, so Paramount, you have to. This is licensable.
John, the John Carter series is similar, right? Where he's a Confederate, or there's at least one movie.
He's an ex-Confederate soldier, yeah.
Yeah. That goes to Mars.
Yeah, I don't really think we could call that one based on a true story.
Well, I don't, but loosely based on a true event, though. I don't know.
Dances with the Wolves. Not based off a true story, but it definitely takes inspired politics and events of its time.
Mm-hmm.
Again, problematic. There's lots of problems we're not getting into. We're just talking about these genres in general before people start yelling at me in the comments.
Yeah, I think someone might start getting on us about there's a difference between based on a true story and historical fantasy, I think is what it is.
Yes.
Historical fiction.
Yeah.
So, a Confederate Yankee in King Arthur's court. There were
Confederate Yankee.
Or whatever the story. A Yankee in King Arthur's court. What is that?
It's a Yankee.
That is not more on Confederate Yankee.
Yeah, it was a Yankee. It wasn't
a Yankee in King
Arthur.
Yeah, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court.
Connecticut, that's
Connecticut Yankee. That's what screwed me up.
That's still north.
That was really close if you think about it. Come on, give me credit here.
Yeah, that was good.
To be fair.
A book that I haven't even seen since grade school. Come on, guys.
Right.
So I do think the more riveting, not more riveting, but I think the more controversial based on true stories is always going to be around the paranormal. And like, I really enjoyed Deliver Us from Evil. I think it was like, what's been really cool about Netflix is, back in the day when you only had cable, they tended to play the same movies over and over again. except for October. October, I could really cash in on my alternative horror movies that they were playing 24/7 during the Halloween season. But Netflix has been really doing a good job lately bringing back various movies that I never heard of, and playing them and highlighting them in my proposed list. And it's been cool to catch some stuff I didn't know had come out. And that was definitely entertaining. But then when you get to, especially by the time you get to the end, you're like, oh, what? How much of this is actually real?
Mm-hmm.
And some stuff you're like, yeah, that sounds like it would have been creepy. But the rest of it, I thought it was funny because in the movie, they make the cop like he killed a child killer. And I could read this in his Bronx accent. He asked the director, he's like, dude, you made me a fucking murderer, but you didn't get the movie title right to my book? Like,
Yeah.
Could you at least get that right? So people can find my book?
Huh.
And so, I don't know. I think it's just worth hashing out and people sharing, if they could, what other movies do you hope was real that say are based on true stories and you actually wished that they were real, or you don't care, you're just accepting that as fact because it was too good of a movie? Versus what would you
talk right now, so don't say something that'll get us canceled.
Yeah.
Biting my tongue.
Fine.
About no, I
Not a
haven't.
joke at you, Jenna. Not a joke at you.
I was a nerd through my high school and school years period, so that part of me is dead. You can make fun of me all you want, Seth.
I would never.
Never.
Not while sober.
Agreed.
We love
All right.
you, Jenna. Unconditional.
Should we wrap it up there then?
Yeah.
Yep.
Before we get
All
too
right.
far into the weeds, we don't want to say anything we shouldn't be saying.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode. We actually kept this one under an hour, so good job, guys. And we'll see you again next time.
Yeah, comment down below if you have any thoughts on any of these.
What movie should we do a review on? Should we tear it apart or build up or highlight for others to see? I don't care if it was based on a true story or not.
I think we need to do more nerd news. We haven't done any nerd news shows in a while.
Well, then coming up next.
Nerd news.
Yeah. All right. Everyone, have a good one.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. For more information and past episodes, please visit our website at galacticdriftwood.space or subscribe to us on YouTube. And now, please deactivate your cranial downlinks, collect your towels, and be sure to watch your step as you exit our gravity well.